It is now time for Fersan in the Field, real issues, real solutions. And this morning we are taking a look at addressing the silent tug-of-war, how nitrogen and potassium imbalance reduce crop yield. And we're going into part 2 of that conversation with Melvin Henry, who is technical manager of Newport-Fersan, or technical manager for Newport-Fersan, Jamaica. And of course, always any conversation that we have with our agronomists, it is a conversation that I know that you will benefit from. Good morning, Melvin. How are you, my brother?
Good morning, Altia. I'm doing great. Good morning to your colleagues in studio and by extension our farmers and other stakeholders in Radio Land.
Good to have you with us.
Doing great.
All right, so Melvin, the tug-of-war continues, or addressing it continues. Yes. So let us see how we can best address it this morning. All right, so Melvin, we often hear farmers saying that they apply fertilizer, their crops look lush and green in some instances, but when it's time to harvest, the yields are just not there. Could this be linked at all to how we manage nitrogen and potassium?
Of course. That is indeed true. And as we talk about part 2, one might ask, why part 2? So let me first say kudos to you for consistently discerning when there's need for continuation or follow-up discussion. You did indicate that when I was on roughly a month ago. So in addition to you being on the ball with your suggestion, there are actually 2 other factors that dictate that there be a part 2 to this discussion. Mm-hmm. One is the prevalence of the issue of nitrogen-potassium imbalance. The reality is that it is, simply put, too common a scenario to ignore. And secondly, and equally as important, the negative impact of such imbalance continues to affect the yields of our farmers. And as a result of that, like you rightly said, it's always a pleasure to join to continue, as it were, to address real issues affecting our farmers, and with the aim of resolving and ultimately preventing future incidents. So the reality is that green, plants having dark green leaves does not necessarily mean that the plant is productive. And this is a very common scenario seen across various crop groups. And later on, I hope I'll have the chance to share with you and our listeners some of the findings over the last couple of weeks since we introduced a new device that within 3 seconds you're able to discern if that imbalance exists within the tissue of the plant. So
did you say 3 seconds?
Within 3 seconds, literally within 3 seconds, we're able to determine whether or not our nitrogen level is excessive or below what it should be. And that forms the basis on which we make recommendations to remedy the situation.
All right, so let us then do a little bit of a deep dive. What are some of the visible signs to tell a farmer that he or she might be having an issue with nutrient imbalance?
Okay, so the first of which is what we refer to as a growth pattern. If you're having a plant having very lush, dark green leaves, rapid reproductive growth taking place, forming a very thick canopy, it's normally an indication that you're having some imbalance. And almost always it is a situation where your nitrogen supply is in excessive amounts. And the reverse is also accurate, where because of the insufficient application of potassium, nitrogen is having a field day. So one keeps the other in check. So if there's a disparity in the volume applied of both nutrients, then you're going to have that situation. The reverse is also accurate, where if you're having plants that have tardy growth, few leaves, they're not expanding, it's an indication that you could have a situation that the potassium is excessive versus the nitrogen. So again, the flip of the situation, which we don't need any of those. Secondly, you have poor flowering and fruit set. So you'll have lots of leaves, but few flowers, and flower dropping prematurely, and you'll have low fruit set. So these are some indicators that in this scenario that you'd have a nitrogen excess, because that's exactly what excessive nitrogen applied to our crops is going to do. So this happens because nitrogen is dominating what we call the metabolic activities within the plant, as potassium deficiency is affecting how the plants retain flower and also the success at which flowering plants actually pollinate. So, and this is a common situation in all our crops, peppers, tomatoes, watermelons, you name it. And if we look at tubers, Irish potato, which is a stem tuber, it flowers, yes, but that's not where we actually get our production from. But in essence, what it does, if you're limiting flowering, in the case of our flowering plants, where our tubers are concerned, stem tuber, Irish potato, you're going to have tuber initiation being delayed, or in sweet potato, which is a root tuber, you're going to have the similar thing happening, your tuber initiation or development being delayed.
Okay.
Leaf symptoms may also include the yellowing or scorching of the leaves edges, and this is normally associated with a potassium deficiency, sometimes induced by the excessive nitrogen that is being applied. So if you're having a potassium deficiency, you'll generally tend to see your leaves dark green, but the edges, the margin of the leaves are scorched or looking yellow, and this is a classic situation that the nitrogen level in relation to potassium is off. Another and a severe challenge that farmers will see and oftentimes wonder why. So I hope that at this point in time, there's great attention and sharing of this information. Once you have an excess application of nitrogen, you also tend to see increased pest pressure. And when we say pest in this context, we are referring to insects, we're referring to mites, we're referring to diseases. So it's an all-inclusive term. So you'll have more aphids, more mites, more whiteflies, and you'll also have more incidents of fungal and bacterial infections. It's a reality that excess nitrogen acts as what we would call an attractant for insect pests. On the other side, the excess nitrogen, what it does to facilitate or make bacteria and fungal issues more prevalent is that the tissues of the plant become softer. And remember we mentioned earlier that once you have a lush growth in the canopy of the plant, meaning that you have a lot of leaves, you have poor ventilation taking place. It therefore means that if you or you have an incident of rain, the moisture on the leaves remain longer. And this is exactly what most of our fungal spores want to develop to cause problems. And once you have soft, succulent leaves, it therefore means the ease with which these fungal spores are able to penetrate the leaves and cause your disease. So in the case of onions, you might have greater incidence of purple blotch. So these are some of the common things that you'll see. And to top it off, you have what we call delayed maturity. So normally the crop has a life cycle, and it is expected that nitrogen gives you the kickstart, and then at some point, once you enter the productive mode, the plant turns over lead role to potassium. If this is not happening, what tends to happen is that you have a crop with an extended growth period, meaning that the time in which you expect to harvest your watermelon, that period becomes extended because nitrogen, being the bully, not giving up role to potassium, is now pushing the plant to continue in vegetative mode. So your plant takes longer to mature, and as a result of that, sometimes you miss critical windows, market windows, that you'd get premier prices.
Right.
That is also one reality.
So the farmer has to be very careful. And I know you can't see me, but, I'm in class and I have my hand up, and then, like I'm saying, me teacher, me teacher.
Yes,
so what happens, Melvin, if potassium is high but nitrogen is low?
Okay, so if potassium is high and the nitrogen is low, you're going to have crops that are more likely very sturdy. Because the dry matter content of the plant would be good. So you're going to have sturdy plants, but they are sturdy, but lack the potential to give you a good yield. And so, like a car without an engine, you will have a sturdy plant lacking nitrogen to move things ahead. So you're not going to have that sort of a yield that you should.
That sounds like nitrogen. Nitrogen is the gas that is firing up the plant.
Definitely.
Wow.
Definitely. So the visible sign as well is that you will more likely see pale leaves paler than they should, small, stunted growth, and the development of the whole canopy, the branches, the leaves, the stems, overall, that process become slowed. And it has this appearance as if the plant is either underfed or overall weak. Another concern in this situation is that there is what we call hidden nutrient interaction. So excess potassium normally competes with the uptake of ammonium. Now, plants absorb nitrogen in two main forms from the soil, ammonium and nitrate. Now, because ammonium has a positive charge, pretty much like potassium, there's always competition. So if you have an excess application of potassium, you're essentially blocking the uptake of nitrogen in the form of ammonium.
All right, so too much of one thing, good for nothing.
An induced deficiency.
All right. All right, so I have to break because, of course, the news is up on us, so we're going to take that, and then when we come back, we will pick up on that power play between nitrogen and potassium and more. Thank you very much, Melvin. So we break away now for the news and the weather, and then when we come back, more first-hand in the field, real issues, real solutions.
Farmers, this one is for you. Want to get rid of all those pesky insects, thrips, aphids, armyworms, spider mites, leaf miners, diamondback moth, and many more? Spectra insecticide and miticide from Newport-Fersan is for you. Spectra is safe, effective, and is approved and registered for the use of melon, cucumber, pumpkin, cabbage, lettuce, broccoli, peppers, onions, tomatoes, potatoes, and peas. Spectra is compatible with most pesticides. Spectra available in farm stores. For a full list of crops and pests, please visit www.newportfersanja.com. Newport-Fersan, first on the land.
We have with us Melvin Henry, who is the technical manager for Newport-Fersan. The feature is Fersan in the Field, Real Issues, Real Solutions. And we've been taking a look at addressing the silent tug-of-war, how nitrogen and potassium imbalance reduces crop yield. And this is part 2 of the conversation that we've been having on this very important matter, this interplay, this tug-of-war between nitrogen and potassium. So what happens if potassium is high and nitrogen is low, or the opposite? Well, that is what Melvin has been sharing with us. Melvin, can you use any of our locally grown crops of economic importance to describe what is likely to happen, say, if nitrogen is too high?
Okay, so let's look at onion as one of those crop of economic importance. So, as mentioned before, what you'll likely see happening if nitrogen, is excessive, is that you're going to have excess vegetative growth. You're going to have excessive leaf growth, and you're also going to see a delay in bulb formation, because essentially what happens is once nitrogen is overriding the plant shift to bulb formation, the formation of the actual onion, you will see, and this normally happens because the carbohydrate that is produced by the plant, instead of being diverted to the production of the onion itself, these are actually channeled to the leaves. And as a result of that, you're going to see small bulbs, if they do form, delayed, and they're going to be at sizes that are not pretty much what we're looking for in terms of a good indication for yield parameter. You're also going to have delay maturity and harvest of onions. You're going to have situations where the crop remains greener, and the usual situation where we call it the breaking of the neck of the onion, where it breaks uniformly and fall in the field, that will be delayed, all because you're having a situation where at the base where the leaves come together, just on top of the onion, that area is generally thicker than it should be if you're having a situation where nitrogen is applied in excessive amounts. And this causes a lot of problems, not only because it reduces or delays the breaking of the neck of the onion, which actually helps in the preservation of the crop. But you'll see later on that it will also affect your post-harvest management, because in storage, you're going to have situation where the bulbs rot quickly, and you'll have what we call rot issues, soft rot issues affecting the plant. And this is so, again, because excessive nitrogen would have significantly reduced the accumulation of what we call dry matter that makes the skin firm and form properly. And therefore, losses in post-harvest can be significant. Another, purple blotch and downy mildew, botrytis are some of the pests and diseases that normally affect onions. If you have that situation where you trigger dense canopy of the plant and you're having softer tissues, it means that the more dense your canopy of the plant, you're going to have naturally more moisture retention if you do have that incident. And that favors the development of these diseases. Other than that, you're going to have imbalances, nitrogen imbalances, nutrient imbalances, which means that the excess application of nitrogen effectively suppresses the uptake, and not only the uptake of potassium, but also how it is used by the plant. Okay. So remember now that potassium is required for the filling of the bulb, so the development of that onion. It also regulates how water moves into the plant, and it also adds strength to the tissue of the plant. So once you have a lopsided situation and an imbalance where nitrogen is taking center stage forever throughout the crop, the life of the onion, what you're going to have ultimately is poor bulb quality and also very small size.
Wow. All right, so what steps can farmers take to confirm that they have an imbalance?
Okay, so there is a quick checklist that we normally recommend. So, for example, if we use the example of nitrogen, there's a quick checklist that we normally advise farmers to ask themselves and answer. One, is my crop too leafy but not fruiting? So if you're seeing that situation, is it yes or no? Are you experiencing flower drop? Are you seeing a high percentage of your flower falling to the ground? Yes or no? Are fruits small and of low quality? That's also another indicator. Are leaves very dark but soft? That's another indicator. And the final one is, am I using mostly nitrogen fertilizer? And the only straight nitrogen that we have in the marketplace is urea. But sulfate of ammonia, which is 21% nitrogen, 24% sulfur, are two of the fertilizers that are used extensively. And if it is that you ask yourself those 5 questions, and 3 of the 5 questions, the answer to 3 of those 5 questions is yes, and it's highly likely that you're having a situation where you're having a nutrient imbalance, and the nitrogen is more likely at play, the one that is causing the issue. Okay. There are also other mechanisms that we assist the farmers in getting confirmation. Like I mentioned earlier, we now introduce to our field team a device that we within seconds can determine where we're at and where we need to be in terms of a remedial step.
So once you go out in the field and you're working with the farmers, you're able to assess immediately what is going on.
Yes, and just to share with you, over the last 2 weeks, we would have had some significant interventions in the Inzo-Damitial area and also that Irish potato belt in Christiania, Shudley, Devon, that area. Where in Shudley, because of the frequency of rainfall, what we realized in Irish potato, a lot of Irish potato in the field now, and what we realized is that the nitrogen levels, as tested, immediately showed that the nitrogen level was lower than it should be. So that's one extreme that we don't want to happen, because it will come to impact how the farmer actually fares out in terms of yield. So that is a situation that requires immediate attention to have that issue resolved. In Amitial and in Road, the reverse was seen in a number of cases where the nitrogen levels were excessive, and like clockwork, where you had the excessive nitrogen levels, you had a higher prevalence of insect pest and disease issues. So again, just driving home the point that getting the balance is critical, because once you have that situation, inadvertently what you're doing is creating a situation that you'll have to respond to in terms of the control of pests and diseases in the field.
All right. So how do we correct in-season imbalances quickly once diagnosed? Because, of course, we don't want the farmers to lose the crops.
Okay. So I'll just go back to the 2 examples I used just now. So in the Christiana area, what we determined was that by and large, I think by my estimation, at least 85% of those that were tested showed that the nitrogen concentration in the leaf was lower than it should be. And visually, if you're familiar with Irish potato, like I am from a youth, you would realize that something is off with the shade of green. And as a result of that, our immediate response was for the farmer to do a foliar application of a product that we have known as Nitromax. This product is actually a 20-0-0 straight nitrogen. So you're actually responding to what is observed as a deficiency. Now, depending on the crop in question and the facility setup, the stage of development of the crop, it could also warrant the need for you to do a side dressing, meaning that you'll apply either via fertigation or you incorporate some nitrogen to get that up. But the foliar application of Nitromax, the first organic Nitromax, work well. And how we determine works well, because we're scientists in the true sense, we would do an assessment 3 to 4 days later with the same marked plants to ensure that there are observed changes in terms of the levels increasing. The flip side, in Inzod and Amitial, where we had excessive nitrogen in the leaves, that is countered by the application of potassium. So in our catalog, we have both a potash, which is a 0-0-20% potassium, or Manipex potassium, again a 20% potassium. The rapid absorption of these products through the cuticles into the leaf of the plant addresses and overall this condition in quick time. And these are our responses once the diagnosis is made, and we also do monitoring. So as I indicated before, we'd go back 3 to 4 days later to do an assessment as to where we are and if further interventions are necessary.
All right. And any final recommendations to farmers seeking to avoid the incidence of nitrogen-potassium imbalances and the unwanted consequences?
Sure. It is always and has always been our flagship at Newport-Fersan that we want farmers to start right. And we say get tested. Get your soils tested so we know exactly where we are from the get-go. And I say this because oftentimes we have situations of excess nitrogen within the system of the plant because one critical component was not factored in, and that is the organic matter content of the soil. By default, your organic matter content in the soil is going to contribute to your nitrogen supply to the plant. So if that is not factored in, you'll have a situation where you could likely be applying or oversupplying nitrogen when already you have a nitrogen credit sitting in the soil.
Right.
So getting tested is very critical.
All right, and of course you can do those tests. I'm out of time, Melvin, but thank you very much. Looking forward to the next time you're able to join us, and we thank you very much. This has been very good information.
Looking forward to it as well.
All right, take care. Melvin Henry there, Technical Manager at Newport-Fersan. And this segment of Farm Talk in Sunny Side Up was brought to you by Newport-Fersan, Jamaica. First on the land.